All right, so it totally appalls me that it's 2015 and we have rules and regulations based on what we can and cannot do, yet all of a sudden we have something called Extreme Rules, and we're told, okay, there's Extreme Rules, these rules are going to be over the top, they're going to be right in your face, they're going to be something attacking, but you still have to abide by them. You know, we get a Chicago street fight, nobody goes to the goddamn street. We get a kiss me arse match, and nobody who actually has to kiss an ass has to end up getting ass shoved in their face. We get a Russian chain match, which really doesn't matter about the chain because the two guys couldn't be far enough away to begin with. And then all of a sudden we go into an RKO-less steel cage match that ends with a goddamn RKO and the same guy walking out with a belt that walked in. So I'm fucking pissed off. I'm confused as to why we even have these rules to begin with when nobody follows through, and at the end of it we still have a B-rated WWE pay-per-view, and I still feel invalidated. What do you guys think?
Well, I thought the rules were extreme.
They could have been more extreme.
I did feel like there was a little bit of lacking in the extremity of the rules, and realistically, none of the rules really added anything to a single match on the card, so it was about par for the course, I'd say.
I think over the top when we heard that Dean Ambrose and Luke Harper were going to go against each other, which I think was right after Monday's Raw, it was like announced on the app. I thought, okay, this is like the closest we're going to get to an all-out brawl, street fight, blood strewn everywhere. Because I think we thought after WrestleMania maybe we were going to get more blood, maybe we we're going to get more gore, more real action out of the people fighting. And that street fight, I mean, sure, it comes out as an almost 60-minute match, but we saw like maybe 25 minutes worth of actual action. So I don't even understand how this was an extreme pay-per-view.
I think the thing that really, like, it doesn't bother me as much because I went into it with really low expectations.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah. And so I thought really, like, the best matches were the matches that really didn't have a huge storyline behind them. So I thought, like, the New Day match was really good. And I think other than that, like, I thought that was really the highlight of the whole show.
Yeah, especially the way that it was all booked going into it. Like, people assumed, and I think we all assumed after Monday night with the New Day beating the Lucha Dragons, we thought the New Day were just going to get thrown into a squash match, so the really weird crowd in Chicago would just, you know, end up tearing them apart, which they did to a point, but the New Day still walked out with the titles, and we'll get to that in a little bit.
Right. I think mostly what this show's going to be is we'll kind of go over Extreme Rules, talk about what mattered and what didn't matter. And I think most of it didn't matter. There's a good percentage of it that didn't matter. But we're also going to talk about Lucha Underground, and we're going to touch on NXT as well, and maybe maybe a little TNA as well. So I'm Seth Skinner.
I'm Bill Hairsine.
I'm Tim LeMay.
And so I guess we'll start at the top of the card with the pre-show from Extreme Rules.
Which was a little bit disconcerting because I know we saw going into Wednesday, Thursday, we saw the WWE was going under testing with Daniel Bryan just to see whether or not he could go against Bad News Barrett. And, I mean, I think we all kind of assumed the worst under the idea that Daniel Bryan wasn't even going to be able to show up until this morning we saw, you know, facts that he wasn't even in the state of Illinois. That kind of showed what we ended up seeing in the pre-show, which was Bad News Barrett going up in a singles competition against Neville.
Yeah, which I thought was kind of, like we said earlier before we started recording, was that it's kind of a strange pairing, but it's nice to get Neville to be on the show, number one, and, you know, because he doesn't have a lot of experience with pay-per-views, obviously, and, you know, the thing was that I thought that he would lose and look good against Barrett, but he ended up winning the match. So I thought that was really strange because we've been talking about this and we even posted about it earlier this week about the Neville push and whether or not he's getting pushed too fast.
Right.
I have to say, I don't really mind Neville winning the match too much because, I mean, Barrett is one of those guys who's been made to lose a little bit more than he should already, which it would be nice to see him win too, but his credibility has just been so damaged that a loss to Barrett might derail Neville's push a little bit, so I can't be too upset about that, but it's still, I'm not sure if it was the right way to go, but it's alright at worst.
Yeah.
What I liked about it was that it was a almost 11-minute match, and you got to see Neville outside of his comfort zone. He's kind of billed as the over-the-top high flyer, the man that gravity forgot. And you see Neville out there. He was brawling. He was outside the ring. He was helping throw Barrett into the barriers. It was one of those things where, you kind of see Neville as the complete package and not just the high flyer, which is so easy to pigeonhole him into. So it was good to see him kind of get that, full circle kind of mentality.
Yeah. I would have liked to see him throw a little bit more out as far as moves. I mean, obviously they didn't have a lot of time to work on the match, but I would have liked to see him do a little bit more than... Because, I mean, he did do pretty much the standard moves that he's debuted with and things like that, so... There were a couple spots in the last couple weeks that were, out of the blue that were really cool, so... It's, I know it's hard to throw in something new every time, but, he could have mixed it up a little more in the match, but I thought it was a good match, one of the better matches in the entire show, which is interesting for a pre-show match.
What sold me on that match before it even happened was Bad News Barrett walking down to the ring with the microphone, and he broke kayfabe in such a way that he kind of positioned the match into why it makes sense. Like, he walked out there and he was talking about how everybody expected him to be facing Daniel Bryan tonight for the Intercontinental title, and that Daniel Bryan couldn't attend due to his injuries. And just the way he nonchalantly said, okay, well, let's bring on Neville so I can hit him with a bullhammer elbow. It wasn't like one of those ones where they just go, oh yeah, Barrett, by the way, you're going to be facing Neville. He came out with the full expectation and kind of sold it to the audience of, you know what, all right, here's a new guy, I'm going to go kick his ass. And, it didn't work out in his favor, but at least it still kind of sold it, for me at least.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, then we went to the main card, which I don't even remember. I think it started with Ambrose Harper, right?
Yeah, it started with Ambrose Harper, which was supposed to be a street fight, but if you look back at Ambrose's past street fights with Cesaro and Bray Wyatt, at least those street fights had stuff littered in and around the ring to kind of sell the idea of a street fight. Other than that, it was just a basic no disqualifications match, which, Seth, I know you and I talked about earlier in the week, that's just what it was going to be. And, I mean, it was everybody trading blows, and then Luke Harper ends up in the front seat of a big SUV, and Dean Ambrose jumps in the window, and they drive up the ramp, and all of a sudden everybody's going, well, what the hell happened? Especially after Raw, where all of a sudden their match didn't go anywhere, and they just called a no contest. It was kind of weird to see that exact thing happen again on the pay-per-view.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure if it was false count anywhere or not, but I thought it was strange that the match ended in the ring.
Odd thing for me was seeing Luke Harper drive a vehicle. That just seems really out of character for him.
Hey, you're talking about truck driver Brody Lee over there.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I remember seeing, there was a shot of him in the driver's seat, and I was like, that is just, such an odd picture to even be seeing right now.
It was a nice SUV, and he's such a scumbag the way he's dressed.
Yeah.
He's expected to be swamp people, and all of a sudden he's in the front seat of a giant SUV, and you're like, oh, I guess that makes sense.
I mean, it was interesting, but there's so much more they could have done with it, and they really, seems like they skimped out on it pretty hard.
And we'll get to that around the time that match actually concluded, which is 3 matches down the card, so...
Yeah, basically what happened was Harper drove away with a hijacked SUV. Ambrose dives in the passenger seat and they drive away.
Without a referee.
Yeah.
That would have made total more sense if they took a referee with them.
I would have laughed if after Ambrose jumps in the passenger seat window, a referee dives in the back window.
That is called doing your job.
I got...
Alright, so after Ambrose and Harper, we move on to the Kiss Me Arse match, where the loser has to kiss the winner's ass. And we get the show-off, Dolph Ziggler and his brand new I'm Over It trunks against the Celtic Warrior, the returning heel Sheamus.
I you know, like, the thing is, these guys are two good workers in the ring, so, like, you'd expect a little bit more of, like, a match that keeps your attention, but I was drifting in and out during this match. I thought it was pretty mediocre, and the fact that it ended with a roll-up also was pretty, like, you know, just not the way I thought it would go.
Especially in a section of the match where I think there were like 2 or 3 roll-ups that were failed before that, and all of a sudden Dolph gets that quick roll-up. I think just watching it, I was like, well, that's a dumb way to end that.
Yeah, I found there was a whole lot of rest spots and rest holds, just generally a slower paced match than I'd expect out of either worker, especially Dolph. And like Seth said, to have it end the way it did, it really did not seem to amount to a whole lot of consequence as far as the in-ring work goes.
Yeah, and like we said at the beginning of the show, there was no consequence to losing the match. Like, the stipulation never took place, so it was kind of like, I felt like they were buying a bunch of time too at the end of the match with Sheamus like shying away from it and all that shit. But
I think the biggest heel move during that match was Sheamus drawing out that kiss my ass part for like a good 5-7 minutes, where you just watch Sheamus pull Dolph around the ring and he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to kiss your ass. I'm going to kiss your ass. Oh no, I'm not. I'm going to go over to the corner and sulk for a minute and a half and then come back. And then just to force Dolph to smush into his ass, it was just awkward.
And it was a good way to get Sheamus heat for that 5 to 7 minutes, and outside of that, I mean, you're building him up as this dominant heel who's an actual threat, who's not a chicken shit, and then you have him shy away from the kissing the ass, and then you have him hit the low blow. I just really wasn't sure what they were trying to go for with it.
It was just an awkward finish to what could have been a great kind of match that just puts some kind of awkward heat on one character over the other. But, I mean, at the end of it, I'm pretty sure we walked right into the tag team match and immediately forgot Dolph Ziggler versus Sheamus, which is a huge disappointment to Dolph Ziggler, who's here to show off, and Sheamus, who's here to be the powerbomb.
yeah, but it's also good because of the fact that it was underwhelming of a match.
Especially since that was one of the 3 matches with an actual stipulation.
Yeah, it was nice to be able to bury it in my mind with actually a relatively good match.
So yeah, I guess from there, I mean, we talked about Dolph Ziggler beats Sheamus. Sheamus makes Dolph smush his ass. I'd say kiss, but he really just forced that head in there.
Yeah, it was more like Sheamus rubbed his ass on Dolph Ziggler's forehead, which was a pretty funny visual to my eye.
Yeah, it was like a cheek-to-cheek thing.
Yeah. But after that, we move into the tag team title match between The New Day, which was Big E and Kofi Kingston, against Tyson Kidd and Cesaro, which that match kind of took a turn I wanted to see happen, but I was confused on how they were going to pull it off in Chicago, which is such a heel-favored town. But I think they did really well. That was a really good, almost 10-minute match.
Yeah, well, they're both heels. Like, their alignment is both heel, but I think Kidd and Cesaro did a decent job working as a face, in a sense, in that match.
Well, going into it that the Chicago fans were going to be all about Kidd and Cesaro because everybody's against the New Day. I mean, just look at the New Day sucks chant, and all of a sudden the New Day have gone from, the great gospel happiness group to a group of, hated thugs.
Yeah, and they built quite a bit of heat, especially after the match, too. So I thought it was like a win-win situation for both because, and like I said during the match, like it's kind of sad that all of these 5 single wrestlers are reduced to having to perform in tag teams because they all have talent individually. And because of the fact that the tag team division's so like weak at the time.
Without the Usos, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just they have to put another team in, and, well, 2 teams, and it's ultimately, I do think it's like kind of disappointing that this talent's wasted. Well, not necessarily wasted, but it's not being utilized to the potential it could be. And we talk about that all the time, not using the potential that they have from the superstars that they have on their roster. And that's one of the big reasons that I think all 3 of us have been disappointed with WWE for the last couple weeks is, it's really stemming from that.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially I was talking to a coworker just this morning, and then I was talking about this match and what we expected coming out of it, and he just kind of like half cocked turned his head and said, "What the hell are Tyson Kidd and Cesaro doing in the tag team division?" And I remember that came out of the tag team turmoil where, everyone was like, well, what's this X team going to be? And all of a sudden Tyson Kidd and Cesaro came down and nobody really had any support for them other than the fact that they liked them both as singles wrestlers and saw them as lost in the card. All of a sudden they're together and you know what? They worked pretty damn well together.
Yeah.
And they put on damn good matches, so they won the title. And you know what? From my perspective, that looked legitimate. They walked into this gimmick of a tag team situation and just overpowered the division. So now you see the New Day take the titles off them, and you're like, you know what? The New Day is taking this heel heat, and they're making it worthwhile. They're not just selling you as, oh yeah, we're also a tag team. They're also showing, you know what? You don't like us, so we're just going to come out and say, fuck you, we're going to do it anyways.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that how fast the crowd started hating New Day, and I think that's what really made them a good heel team. And the other thing I thought that's disappointing is the fact that Xavier Woods is just kind of sidelined in a sense, and he's become more of a manager than an actual member of the New Day.
Well, I don't know if you guys remember this, but they teased this group as a faction way back to last summer around SummerSlam. They were doing back group scene vignettes of just showing, Biggie Langston and Kofi Kingston hanging out with Xavier Woods, and Xavier Woods always looked like the manager moving forwards. And that's why you see him so sparingly when they do tag team matches, like when somebody else has a concussion or somebody else is a little sore. You don't see him taking on that wrestling role, and he works so well as a heel manager. You saw that tonight.
Yeah.
It was a nice role to see him in. I personally thought that the storytelling and the psychology revolving around this match was probably the best of the night. I mean, you have New Day who are sorely in need of some legitimate heat. I was of the opinion that the heat for the New Day was coming more from the crowd wanting to see this whole gimmick just go away instead of an actual dislike of the team themselves. And so I wasn't convinced that a heel turn was going to solve anything, but they've actually done a good job, especially the past couple weeks, getting that heat onto the New Day, converting it into actual dislike from the crowd. And I thought they did an even better job in the way this match ended of building up some sympathy for Kidd and Cesaro, which I think would be a pretty good way to turn them face and maybe keep this feud going for another month or so, because there's not much else going on in the tag division to give them a lot of other options. So I do think this was about the best outcome we could have had tonight, and that's something I can't really say about anything else out of this card, honestly.
Yeah. I think that the thing that I noticed the most about the New Day is the fact that they've really embraced the heel aspect of it, and when you look back on it, it almost seems like they were intending to be a heel from the beginning. And that's a good thing, because they really haven't changed much, and they've built heat at the same time.
Yeah. I will say two things moving out of this match. For one, Kidd and Cesaro, not to make a pun out of this, but they are now looking for a payback, so you automatically have a match set up for a month from now when we're moving on to the next pay-per-view, which is really good for the tag division. And second of all of a sudden you've taken, I would assume, the least liked tag team available, which probably takes over from Los Matadores, but you have the tag team you least want to see hold the titles, and now they're holding the titles, which immediately grabs heel to the whole division, and now all of a sudden you want to see a way for that division to reemerge itself. Wow, you've just reimbursed the whole tag team division after saying they were so weak for so long. Now all of a sudden you have the Lucha Dragons who are right there ready to take the next step. You have Kidd and Cesaro who want their payback. You have the New Day with the titles, and you have the Usos on the sidelines. And you know what? I don't even miss the Usos at this point.
Yeah.
So moving on from that, if you guys don't have anything else, moving on to the culmination of Dean Ambrose and Luke Harper, we saw the SUV storm out of the arena right after the New Day goes into their interview with Renee Young, I think, or Eden. I can't remember which one it was. But all of a sudden you hear honking of the horn, and all of a sudden Dean Ambrose now is magically driving the SUV, and he storms into the arena and pretty much drops an elbow on the New Day.
Yeah, I think actually shortly after that, my WWE Network feed cut out for a minute, and when we tuned back in, they were in the ring. So I'm not really sure how they did get back to the ring, but I imagine it was just a bunch of dragging. And I remember when they came back from break, they did show one spot on the stage. I don't remember exactly what it was, but gotta love WWE Network for the quality you're getting for $9.99.
It was such a depressing moment because WrestleMania, at least for us, I mean, I know you really didn't have any problems, and for me, I had pretty much 1080p the entire time. I saw a lot of people like talking about it wasn't that way for them, but for us, I feel like it worked out great for WrestleMania, and we went right back to Royal Rumble and Fastlane level quality to where it cut out every 10-15 minutes, and we had to kind of struggle and put the pieces back together when everything came back to live.
Which doesn't make any sense to me because it's the biggest pay-per-view of the year, and you get great a great stream. Doesn't make any sense.
But you see Dean Ambrose get back into the ring with Luke Harper. They throw a bunch of chairs everywhere. Dean Ambrose wraps up the dirty deeds onto some chairs, and he gets his first pay-per-view win since 2013. Are we about to see that push of Dean Ambrose that we finally need?
I hope so, but I don't want to put... I can't predict any of that shit now because of the way that they've just been screwing everything up. Like, I want it to happen, but I still don't see it happening. I mean, they don't even push Bray Wyatt, who could easily be a top 4, top 5 guy in the company.
And that's the thing. We saw Bray Wyatt very briefly in his vignette today. And, I mean, it's been rumored for weeks, and we're pretty much determined that it's going to be Bray Wyatt against Ryback. But we see Ryback later in the show, and Bray Wyatt's nowhere to be seen during his vignette or his moment with Bo Dallas. And it's like, it's hard to put these two together when you never show them together, and you never give us a legitimate reason for those two to go after each other. It's like Bray Wyatt's picking people out of a bingo tumbler and just saying, you know what? This month I'm going to go after this guy. And I'm tired of that kind of action. I want to see Bray Wyatt have a real reason to hate people.
That really is what it feels like. And it's just really ridiculous that he keeps losing in all these feuds, but they just act as if nothing ever happened and continue to have him sort of tread water until something comes up. But it's like at some point something has to come up. I mean, how many feuds has he had with big name guys? Jericho, Cena. I mean, like, you can't keep burying him in these feuds and expect him to be a top guy.
Bray Wyatt came out of the Dean Ambrose feud on top in December at Tables, Ladders, and Chairs, and we did not have a meaningful Bray Wyatt match until WrestleMania, to which he lost relatively easily to The Undertaker, who is so old that just watching the match is painful. And all of a sudden you're going to tell us that Bray Wyatt is still something to be like a reckoning force? Come on, we're not that stupid. We're not that naive. Show us Bray Wyatt as the monster that he claims to be and keep that mentality. Keep him like a Rusev to where, he's going to continue to come out and steamroll guys.
Yeah, and it felt like neither guy came out of that feud strong because they just don't seem to push anybody where they need to be.
They push the one guy and like the 3 or 4 other guys who could be waiting in the wings just in case their one push doesn't work out. Those guys just fade to the bottom. You saw the Roman Reigns push that failed miserably because the fans just didn't care for it. And all of a sudden you had Ambrose sitting on the side, you had Wyatt sitting on the side, Ryback, people who could storm in and take the spot, and they're just still sitting there, spinning their tires, waiting for a moment to actually shine and matter in the booking.
Yeah. I mean, I can't stress enough just how much they don't do with their talent. So, I guess we can just move on to Cena and Rusev, which really, I thought it was relatively underwhelming. Another gimmicky match.
Right.
I actually expected Rusev to come out on top of this one.
I wanted that so bad. I wanted Rusev to come up on top because he needs to have a reason to be the big bad powerhouse.
I didn't really pay a lot of attention to this either because it was one of those matches that, we've seen a bunch of times and, the pace wasn't incredibly fast. You sort of come in and out of focus, paying attention to it. So, ultimately, Cena ends up winning, which, probably sets up another match.
Well, Lana assumed that match. She got that match afterwards.
Yeah. Lana actually ends up walking into the Authority's office, so that's kind of a foreshadow of what they may or may not do with the storyline. Because who fucking knows?
It. They've already announced that John Cena and Rusev are meeting at Payback in an I Quit match.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so that's what we have out of it. And I mean, John Cena's not going to quit, and Rusev's not going to quit, so that's a pretty dumb gimmick to give it.
I think it'd be a good way for Rusev to build even more heat by making Cena, he says never give up, but have Cena actually give up. That'd be kind of a good way to get Rusev more of that extreme heel, because you have two huge monster heels at this point, and in Rusev and Brock Lesnar. Rusev's kind of that notch below Brock Lesnar, and really with Brock Lesnar absent so much of the time, you need somebody to fill that void.
Exactly, and especially when you're trying to build up people like Bad News Barrett and Luke Harper and Sheamus as other monster heels, and if you were to build a hierarchy, none of those guys even come close to Rusev, and you still can't do anything with Rusev and Bray Wyatt when you have them almost at the eclipse of trying to get a world heavyweight title. It just seems really log-jammed and really backwards, and nobody's gaining any traction whatsoever.
Yep.
There's really not a whole lot to go with. I mean, they've got Rusev stuck with Cena again for another month, which, I don't know, it's a no-quit, or I-quit match is, I don't know, I do think it's a good way to regain some of Rusev's credibility if they're actually going to go ahead and put Rusev over Cena, and you can at least say that Cena and Rusev split a 4-match series so as to not completely put Rusev below Cena Cena below Rusev. But it's been about 4 months, the better part of a third of a year we've seen of Rusev and Cena.
Yeah.
And
I'm bored of it.
Yeah, I mean, and it doesn't even feel like there's much else they could do with them. They haven't done they're not trying to close it out, but it really hasn't seemed like either one of them has been any stronger for facing the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it just kind of bores the whole idea because, of course, you can't bury Cena and you can't put him lower in, the hierarchy. So he's going after the U.S. title, but they're still going to hold the U.S. title as a higher thing because Cena's holding it. And you're not doing anything with Cena overall. He's just kind of standing there with the title issuing open challenges that you know he's not going to lose.
Mm-hmm. In a way, they sort of worked themselves into a corner with that, but, it was also the build-up of so many weeks of that kind of USA versus Russia sort of storyline.
Yeah, but we've seen that with Jack Swagger and everybody else under the sun. And at this point, I no longer see him as a Russian heel. I just see him as a jackass who's there just to be the big beast and verbally beat the shit out of Lana, which somehow is okay in their PG era to just berate his manager / girlfriend.
Yeah, it was what was it called? A Russian chain match or whatever?
Yeah, touch all four corners in succession, which was nice to have the lights, but I think that was kind of a wasted for a touch.
It was really just the exact same thing as the, I think it was Texas Bull Rope match they called it, with JBL and, I keep forgetting who it was. I think it was Eddie Guerrero or somebody along those lines.
Tonight they referenced 3 different JBL and Eddie Guerrero gimmick matches, so that just shows how deep into the pool they were reaching when it came to their statistics.
Yeah. So not a whole lot else to say about that. I would imagine that they set up another match at Payback or something like that. Maybe even wait until SummerSlam. But I don't know.
So moving on from one terrible treatment of women for Lana, we move right into the Divas title match with Nikki Bella and Naomi. And I really wanted Naomi to win this just based on the fact to get the title off the Bellas, which, I mean, their shelf life is coming pretty soon. But, I mean, Paige has been written off television to be on a movie. And, I thought Naomi pretty much earned her spot. I mean, she hasn't overly shined as a top Divas performer, but she's kind of really taken as much hold as she can with this character that's been kind of spun based on the fact that AJ Lee is not there anymore.
Mm-hmm. I thought it would have been nice to give Naomi the belt just, to change it up a little bit, since Nikki has had a decently long title reign, and I thought that Nikki's boots were the highlight of the match, basically.
Yeah.
Or Naomi's boots, rather.
The light up lightsaber boots.
Yeah, which changed color, but on incredibly odd increments.
It was those shoes that kids wore in like second grade that lit up as you walked down the hallway.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if they were changing with impact or not, because a lot of times, at one point it was the yellow and the green, and they just didn't change for like a good minute and a half.
And it doesn't help that she doesn't have a color combination since the Usos are out of competition. That I have no idea what Naomi's color actually is, especially since she came out wearing like the black leather. It's like, well, does she have a color that she rallies behind like Cena, or is she just going to be like the rainbow boot girl?
Well, maybe that's what it was. Maybe she was just trying to test out all the colors.
Whichever still shot gets the most likes on Instagram will be her new color tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I don't think we need to waste any more time on that, which was the shortest match of the night. But we move on from there to Roman Reigns and the Big Show in the Last Man Standing match, which kind of pissed me off because in the way that started, you heard King talk about, how are they going to slay the Giant? How are they going to defeat the Giant? And you know what? I went on cagematch.net and I looked up exactly how many losses the Big Show has in the WWE. And going into this match, he has lost 933 career matches. Which is roughly a third of the matches he's been in his career. So I think we need to retire the gimmick that says he's the Giant that's too hard to defeat. Because once you're almost batting 1,000 losses, it's not that hard to beat the Giant.
Yeah, at that point you're like expected to lose every time, and like the fact that I was so not hyped for this match because it's just two workers that like I haven't been incredibly impressed, especially Big Show, but Roman Reigns has been building. I think he's been a lot better in the ring, but at the same time you got two guys that like aren't incredibly ridiculous in the ring, and I thought the match was still okay for a Big Show match.
Yeah.
Big Show looked good, which is not good overall, but it's good for a Big Show match.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought this was a good continuation of Roman Reigns' work in the Brock Lesnar match, where most of the work he performed in that match was just selling like he's had the shit beat out of him. And he did a lot more of that in this match. He took some impressive spots that I wasn't expecting to see him take. And overall, I mean, it wasn't a great performance out of Roman Reigns. It wasn't on the par with his matches with Daniel Bryan or with Brock Lesnar, but it was a good enough performance. It told the story that it was supposed to tell.
Yeah.
I mean, he has been improving in the ring. His selling, I do feel like, has improved the most out of any of his attributes, but it's still, I couldn't really get that invested in it. It's just not a match I'm interested in seeing
Nothing
for
on the
the
line.
second or third time in 2015.
Right, there was nothing on the line as far as storyline goes, and I thought that match was thrown together.
I tell you, the problem moving forwards is that Roman Reigns for about 3 or 4 months was billed as the Superman. You can't beat me, you can't knock me down, I'm gonna keep coming. And that was what they set him up in for every single match. Look at the Royal Rumble. He's going to come in and he's just going to keep staying alive. But now you watch him and he's almost in the underdog Daniel Bryan kind of mentality where it's like, can he survive this? Will he outlast this? He's this little underdog and he's got to come out on top. He's got to keep fighting. He's got to keep clawing to get back to the top. And it's like, well, if he's your Superman, why all of a sudden is he at the bottom of your totem pole when it comes to these matches? If he's the Superman, he should be the guy who's going to keep the big show down. I have a hard time buying the fact that he's going to be this underdog and the Superman at the same time, because you never look at Superman and say, boy, how is he going to get out of this? It's always, oh yeah, Superman, he'll come out on top because he's the big, tough, strong guy. And, billing him as the underdog, having to fight his way out of a situation just kind of ruins his character.
Yeah, I mean, like, I just thought it was, like I said, it was just kind of thrown together and, like, not a lot to come out of the match, either way it goes, really. But I do agree, I think that Roman Reigns showed that he can sell moves a little bit better than he, has come off to in the last few pay-per-views. So, ultimately, I guess we can just move on to the cage match between Orton and Rollins.
Which was kind of an underwhelming cage match. I mean, it was a lot of throwing people against the cage, it was a lot of chasing. It was a lot of Seth Rollins almost getting over the top and Randy pulling him back in, which definitely fits into Seth Rollins' character because he's been kind of a slimy heel who gets his way out of situations. And yet, up until tonight, really hasn't had to defend the fact that he's the title holder. He hasn't had any real stiff competition. But it was just a lot of give and chase the entire match. It wasn't a lot of offense on either side. And up until, Kane slamming the door on Rollins' face, did we see any kind of actual, toe-to-toe matchup?
Mm-hmm. I think ultimately they need to eliminate the fact that you can win via pinfall or submission in a cage match. I think that's kind of stupid.
You should just only be able to escape the cage.
Yeah, exactly. Even the door is a little too much. It's kind of stupid because it takes away from the fact that it's a cage match.
Exactly. How many cage matches have we seen in the last 3 years where somebody wins by going over the top? It's always some useless way that somebody's managed to, skim their way out of the door.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that spot enough times where it's desensitized to the point where we don't care that it happened. And I think that, like we said before, it was kind of stupid that the RKO was banned and it ended up happening. But
yeah.
I thought what was cool was the RKO or the Randy Orton doing the pedigree. I thought that was interesting as well. But I think really what it comes down to is the fact that they're trying to stir up controversy with the whole RKO being banned. Rollins determined it and then used it against him. I also like the fact that Orton went for the punt as well. That did happen at some point.
Yeah, and the whole idea was that the RKO was banned as a stipulation. It was banned as it's not on the table, you can't use it, anything close to that, either side of the table. And yet all of a sudden the grimy heel Seth Rollins uses that maneuver to manifest his way out of the cage, and we're all supposed to sit around and go, all right, that's okay. There's no repercussion from that. He should be disqualified for use of the RKO. That was his stipulation to begin with, and now all of a sudden he uses that to gain his victory.
I do expect that to come up tomorrow night, most likely, as a way to parlay into another Seth Rollins and Randy Orton match. I thought that was just a cheap out for them to squeeze another match out of the feud, so I wasn't totally surprised by it, but I was expecting, there's a lot of speculation on the internet that Seth Rollins would get himself disqualified by performing an RKO on Randy Orton. That was the direction I expected him to go with it, and I was kind of disappointed that they didn't, as I thought that would tell a better story, especially considering the type of heel that Seth Rollins is. But I guess what they did, it can work, but it wasn't the optimal solution for me.
Yeah.
It turns into Extreme Rules do not apply, because I don't understand how you have no RKO be like half the stipulation of a match, and then you still end it because of an RKO. That's just a stupid way to book yourself out of a situation. And obviously we're going to see some kind of resolve from that come Monday at Raw, but we've already seen what the main event's going to be at Payback. Why do you do it in that manner? It just completely dumbfounds me.
I just there's I mean, we can't even stress enough how many like decisions have been really bad, and like I thought really the biggest thing was that Kane didn't play as much of a part in the match as I would have expected him to because of the things that he's done leading up to the match.
Yeah, and especially since Kane's only real big thing was that he did the double choke slam on J&J Security, and then he set up the Seth Rollins pin on Randy Orton that was, shouldered out of. But I feel like that could have been the perfect moment for Kane to turn on Seth Rollins and go independent, or maybe join Randy Orton and don that mask again, because he's kind of getting to the point where we know he doesn't have a long shelf life left. And we know we'd all rather see him leave the WWE with the mask on and with that, unitard that he's been wearing. And it would have seemed like the perfect opportunity to do that. And all of a sudden, they spun their tires, and now we don't get that kind of resolution.
Yeah, and really, like you said, that the only big spot with Kane was that double choke slam, and it's like, I feel like we've been desensitized to the point where seeing J&J Security get murked is not really like a big spot anymore. But okay, we got 20 minutes left, so we'll move to...
I have to take a quick bathroom break.
Okay, first of all, I want to try and kind of rate this pay-per-view. Honestly, like, I thought it was like there were really bad points and there were really good points. I guess I would give it a 6.5 because I didn't think it was a spectacular pay-per-view, but there were some decent matches.
Yeah, I tend to think that the paper definitely started off a lot stronger than it finished. I mean, there were a few highlights here and there in the second half, but I feel like your street fight, your tag team title match, they all outshined the matches on the second half of the card. I mean, there were some unexpected surprises just in the quality of, particularly, the Roman Reigns and Big Show match. But overall, I don't think I'd have to give it between, I'd say a 5.5, maybe a 6, depending on how I'm feeling, but I don't think I could go quite as high as a 6.
I agree with Bill 100%. I was giving it a 6 out of 10 based on generosity, and because the fact that they bill this as the one night a year that WWE goes extreme, and all of the gimmick matches they gave us came out way worse in reality than they looked on paper. And you know what? When I go into Raw tomorrow night, the two things I have on my mind are the fact that Dean Ambrose finally won a pay-per-view match as a singles competitor in like 2 years, and the fact that the New Day are your new tag team champions. Outside of that, this whole pay-per-view for me was pretty much a wash.
Yeah. I just don't like to go below a certain number because, it's WWE, there's a certain caliber there, but, I go around 6.5, ultimately. So you can take your piss break now, by the way.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
So while he is pissing, we'll start talking about Lucha Underground this week, which was really cool. I thought there was really only 2 matches, one for the newly issued Trios Championship, and there was also a singles match before. Started out with Pentagon versus Sexy Star, and decent match. I mean, you can't say, if you watch Lucha Underground, you can't say that really any of the matches are subpar because the ring work is just phenomenal. But definitely not the highlight of the show because the Trios Championship was absolutely phenomenal.
This was a solid match, and it did a pretty good job of, I don't know if it quite wrapped up, but it was a major point in the storyline between Pentagon Jr. and Sexy Star, and they had the Superfly unmasking worked in there, and if it was a conclusion, I think it was a good one, and it's nice to see Sexy Star get a win over an opponent as credible as Pentagon. It wasn't necessarily the outcome I was expecting, but it was definitely a solid match, solid outcome, all around. Just
It worked.
any other card, it would probably be one of the highlights, but the match that followed this was just incredible.
Yeah.
Really.
And really it was because, I mean, how long was the match? Probably a 40-minute match.
Yeah.
I mean, the show is like, 45 to 50 minutes long. Because, they got to deal with the commercial breaks and things like that. But I think ultimately I would like to see Lucha Underground, A, move to 2 hours, and B, introduce a minor belt. I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
All right, I'm back.
So we just talked about Sexy Star and Pentagon.
Great match. I mean, I wish Pentagon could have been a little bit stronger, but you need to build the fact that the female lucha fighters are as good as the male competitors, especially when you get into the trios match later, and you see the fact that one of the top combatants has a female as one of their, main targets.
Yeah, and the blend, I think, really works out for Lucha Underground because it's different. And I guess that'll kind of transition us right into that trios match, which starts out with 3 teams and was a really good match. I think Tejano's team was the first one eliminated, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I can't stress enough, how much we recommend Lucha Underground to everybody who listens, because the in-ring work is just phenomenal. But I thought the match was well done, especially the whole Dario Cueto kind of coming out and reintroducing the crew.
I'm kind of super disappointed that Cage, Tejano, and King Cuerno were not the main group left, because I think as a whole that trio group is just disturbingly effective. But then again, that King Cuerno is probably one of the top title shot holders, and then you have Tejano, who is just an outright street fighter, and Cage, who is just overall muscle. So to defeat that group early kind of frees them up for whatever they're going to do down the road.
Yeah, I think they want to put Cage in the title picture as well, so I don't blame them for eliminating that team first.
Yeah, I would have preferred to see them be the second team eliminated. I do think they are stronger heels for the eventual winners of Angelico, Ivelisse, and Son of Havoc to overcome, but the way they went about it with the interference from the planted Daivari, formerly of WWE, it was a good way for him to make a debut. It was a pretty credible way for them to get defeated, so that pretty much went as well as they could pull that off.
Well,
really.
Was this the first match for the Mac, or has he ever been on a show before?
Oh, he's been on the show before.
Okay.
I think their qualifier for the trios title
that's
was
right.
him
That's right.
and Killshot's first match.
Yeah.
They had their tryout, which I believe was 3 weeks ago, and then last week they actually had the Mac go against. They had a one-on-one triple threat match with one person from each team in the trios championship going against each other, and I believe the Mac was the guy sent in for that.
I think he was really athletic as far as his size goes, but I think this whole match was just really, really good. And if you have Time Warner Cable, you can get it on demand on the El Rey on demand or whatever. But the spot that stood out to me the most was Angelico's spot off of the whatever you want to call it.
Ledge there, that massive dive off the ledge.
Yeah, it was like a diving crossbody into the ring, which was really sweet, I thought. And that's one of the things about Lucha Underground is the way that they set up their venue so that there's so many possibilities. And, the crowd's so, close to everything, and I think it'd be an awesome show to go to.
Yeah, and the way they built that up with the shot of Angelico just wiped out against the fence, and they specifically mentioned that he was too far away to do anything, to contribute anything, and then it cuts away into the ring to, I think it was Ivelisse being cornered, and then you just see Angelico come flying out of nowhere. The presentation really helped make that spot.
And she did have, I don't know if she sprained it or broke it, but her ankle...
Sprained. It was a sprain.
Yeah, she had an injured ankle, so that was interesting that she worked most of the match, at least half of the match with that injury.
I don't know, and just rewatching it, it looked like she actually might have been limping on her way into the ring, so I would not be surprised if she worked the entire match with the injury. Either way, it's incredibly impressive, and it really helps put her over as just a complete badass, which I think either way that would have happened given that match, but that just really almost makes it a mythological figure, really.
Yeah.
And it kind of surprises me to see, Angelico being so successful in Lucha and AAA, based on the fact that if he were in WWE, his size and his athleticism would put him almost on top of the map. Like, he's a good, 6'2" guy who can high fly almost as good as Neville, and just his reaction time, his reaction speed, his setup, and the way that he's able to sell maneuvers, I think he's almost invaluable to Lucha Underground.
I think he's phenomenal, and everything from the episodes I've watched, which I've tried to watch the last couple weeks, probably like the last 5 weeks or so, and I think everything I've seen of him has just been awesome, and him and Son of Havoc are my two favorites instantly, but I think that him, Son of Havoc, and Ivelisse were the right people to take those titles because, you have that storyline they're all kind of conflicting characters, and at the same time, they're all incredibly talented workers, so they all do deserve those belts. So I thought that was just an absolutely phenomenal match.
And I can't wait to see what they do with the trios moving forward. Since they've had their tournament, they have their champion. I can't wait to see what Dario Cueto, conjures up to have go against them in the future.
Yeah. So we're running short on time, so we'll run through NXT. There's not like a bunch we want to really talk about.
There are a bunch of squashes.
Yeah, I think there was 3 notable matches that were squashes, which were the Itami match, the Rhino match, and there was one more. Finn Balor. Yep. So those were really short matches, just kind of filling some time in, and then they had a triple threat with the Divas, which we're watching now.
Charlotte against Bayley against Becky Lynch.
And Becky Lynch finally getting her time. I think it ended with Charlotte with a figure 4, kind of like she does that bridge thing, and then Becky Lynch kind of sneaks a pin in on Bayley. And so it was a decent match. I think the Divas in NXT at this point are really pretty solid workers.
Oh, yeah. In terms of in-ring work, they easily blow out pretty much the entire Divas roster outside of maybe Natalya. I think they're all already more polished for the most part than most of the main roster Divas.
Yeah, and I was tweeting with the Nasty, who is like the main Bleacher Report writer about this, when he was talking about the Divas match in WWE. We kind of talked about how the Divas in NXT really let the action do the work. You don't see too much mic work between, Charlotte, Bayley, and Becky Lynch going into this match, but that did not undersell the match whatsoever. We still knew exactly what we were getting. We already know Charlotte's the number one, main threat in the the Divas or women's division. And we know Charlotte's going to be on the main roster within, a couple of months. We know Bayley still has some work to go, and Becky Lynch was the one who had the most to gain from this match, and I think we're all happy that she actually got her due.
Yeah. I think, realistically, it's just the fact that none of these Divas are coming up, and the fact that, like we said earlier, the Divas division and the WWE main roster is relatively weak, especially after losing AJ Lee. You got to bring somebody up, and I think like you said as well, there's not a lot of mic work that these guys have to do in NXT, and there's not a lot of mic work they have to do in Lucha Underground. So it really leaves you to a point where you have to tell a story in the ring. And if you're forced to do that, you do. You are literally forced into doing it. So I think that's really the way to do it. The less talking, the more work you're going to have to put out in the ring.
And not to mention that Divas match only lasted like 11 and a half minutes, yet I didn't feel like it took that long. I felt like it was 3 minutes and all of a sudden we had a resolution. The way they're able to tell that match, the way they're able to telescope what they're going to do, and the fact that it's over just in that length of time shows that, you know what, if you gave those three women 11 and a half minutes in a WWE ring for Give Divas a Chance, they're going to put on one hell of a show.
That was really one of the only two matches that mattered on NXT this week. You also saw, I think it was was it Owens and Riley?
Yeah, Owens and Riley finally had their big match, which, I mean, it wasn't that long of a match, but you saw Alex Riley with his rage. And I want to tell you, if Alex Riley is going to have his moment of resurgence, that definitely showed he can still hang with the top guys in either developmental or even the undercard of the WWE. It never really looked like Alex Riley was outside of like the realm. It wasn't a squash match. It was definitely even-sided for the most part.
Right, and I think Alex Riley's he's still in really good shape too. So it's surprising to me, that they haven't really done anything with him before this. And like you said, he does hang with the top of NXT right now. So I think it's really interesting. I don't think we saw Solomon Crow this week, did we?
Nope.
No, we got saved from his terrible, single uniform, whatever he wears. It does not flatter him whatsoever.
No.
So, did Owens win this match? I don't remember.
Yeah.
He wins and then Zayn comes out.
Yeah. And that pretty much sets up the next NXT TakeOver main event, which, I mean, we all kind of assumed that Sami Zayn was going to have his next due against Kevin Owens. We know that's going to be the rivalry moving forwards, or else we would have seen Sami Zayn on the main roster by now.
Yeah. I think what I wanted to do was, since we have 4 brands that we're talking about now, we don't have enough time for TNA, obviously, but I do want to try and rank these brands as of right now. As far as ring work goes, my top 4 are Lucha Underground number 1. Number 2 would have to be NXT. TNA is at 3. Which is surprising to a lot of people probably. But they did have a good main event this week, and they've had Kurt Angle doing some good work, and he's been in feuds with Lashley, Austin Aries. I don't know, he's just been a bunch of good feuds recently. So I think that the ring work has been better than WWE. So it's interesting to see that WWE is at the bottom of that right now. Yeah. So how do you guys rank the ring work right now?
Right now I'd have to say Lucha Underground tells a better story from start to finish. I think NXT still has the better in-ring work of the 4 major ones we've talked about. I mean, TNA is great, but I mean, TNA has had so many legal and realistic issues in the past couple of weeks that kind of makes me question their legitimacy. So I still have to say WWE takes at least 3rd on that rank, just in the fact that they're still going to compel me to watch 2 to 3 times a week. So I feel like, I can't necessarily count that out, but Lucha Underground is such a great story. It's such a great 1 hour of entertainment a week that they're able to pack in such great storylines that it's hard not to watch that.
Well, I was also going to have you guys rank them as far as storyline goes as well. So before that, Bill, what do you think as far as ring work goes?
Yeah, as far as pure ring work, I'd have to say, basically agree with your rankings. I'd say 1 Lucha Underground and 2 NXT, mostly because I think Lucha Underground does a better job of consistently week to week putting good matches on TV. And NXT has been in sort of a rough patch for the past month or so, but they do tend to put out a good product. But I do tend to think that they were a little bit weaker than most of us seem to remember now before they brought in this crop of superstars that they have in there now. And I do think that the current rough patch they've been in is almost a bit of a regression to their mean. So I would have to say that Lucha Underground takes the nod over NXT. And then I would say that 3 would be TNA and WWE 4 for the same reason. I think WWE does have the better high points, but consistently week to week, I just like TNA's ring style better. It actually reminds me more of the classic style of the early 2000s and the 90s before WWE was neutered in ring-wise, and it's just it's a lot more traditional style, really. And
Yeah.
it does happen to tell a story quite well, and there's just a lot of things that I miss from when I used to enjoy wrestling as a younger person.
Yeah, exactly. So,
I do want to hit on 2 things before we head out, because this is the end of the podcast. One, of course, you can check us out for most of our main events when it comes to Lucha, NXT, Raw, SmackDown, and TNA. You can check us out on our Twitter feed, which I believe is Same Circle Podcast on Twitter. And yeah, you can follow us there or on our Facebook page, Same Circle Wrestling. We're pretty active on that, whether or not we're having full-line stories, which we're trying to write once a week to kind of, wrap up things that we're thinking about, things that we're going over the top with sometimes, as well as, news that we're posting from other websites to kind of give us a better feel of the wrestling factions as a unity. But one of the things I want to kind of institute to this podcast for Seth, Bill, and anybody else who wants to contribute is kind of like our one main feel to wrap up the podcast, like our one big shot we want to take moving forwards, like our one drastic step. And, I'll lead this off just because I'm coming up with the idea. I think Tyler Breeze should be on the main roster. I think that exact gimmick should be on the main roster, especially if we're talking about Dolph Ziggler maybe having a shelf life, maybe leaving WWE at the end of his contract in the middle of the summer. I think Tyler Breeze is the perfect substitute. I think his character, his gimmick would go over not necessarily well, but the fact that he's a heel, I think that would be perfect for the main roster right now, is the fact that self-absorbed supermodel kind of guy would definitely take off.
yeah, I can totally 100% agree with that because, number one, they don't do anything with him on NXT. It seems like he's just kind of floating around. And number two, like you said, he would fit in with that main roster.
Yeah. If anything, I do think that gimmick is, in terms of just like how far that gimmick has come along and been developed, I do think that in that it's probably come further than any other wrestler's gimmick in either NXT or WWE over that span. If anything, my concern is that aspects of that gimmick would be lost upon the promotion to WWE. But I do think the gimmick is main roster ready. I think he's ready as a performer and as a ring worker, and I could totally see him doing really well on the main roster.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why I call it, our Same Circle drastic take. That's my personal view. I think Tyler Breeze should be on the main roster. I think that gimmick, that self-absorbed part just makes him like, I don't want to say this, but the next Jericho. That next, look at me. I know who I am. You're not going to ruin that aspect. Here I am. Come at me. I think that would be perfect on the main roster right now.
Yeah. So next week I'll ask you guys how you would rank them as far as the storyline goes. But my battery's on 10% on my laptop right now, so I'm going to wrap it up. So thank you for listening. We're Same Circle Podcast, and we will see you next time as soon as possible.
Love you.
Same.